Hello. Sarah's bringing around a sign-up sheet for any of these bills, I guess. With that, Representative Bonner, what is your number? 14? Okay. Please open us in prayer.
Sure. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for today. Thank you for this beautiful weather. We just pray for wisdom as we consider these issues that are so important to our constituents and throughout the state of Georgia. In your name we pray. Amen.
Thank you. First up is Senate Bill 156. Senator Harbin had quite a few changes throughout the weekend. This is how Sean Marie and I spent our Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Go ahead. So make sure you tell us the LC number.
Chair substitute. And from what I see here, we dealt with a couple of things. This is changing the position of the additional person that is heading to call the chief labor officer.
All right, hold on one second. Does everybody have 2-8? Is that the last? Okay. All right, we're good. Okay, sorry, continue.
And his duties are more focused on just dealing with the financial audit issues rather than the unemployment issues. From that standpoint, appointed by the Speaker of the House, confirmed by the Senate Committee on Government Oversight. From that posture, and it's providing him also a staff in this running to December 31st, 22.
Okay, thank you for that. We have discussed this for hours, so I'm gonna, if we had a couple of people, or at least one sign up. Roy Bowman, would you come up and share, and then I'm gonna be ready to take action on this if y'all don't mind. But he had asked to speak earlier, so.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Roy Bowen with the Georgia Association of Manufacturers, and I appear before you today to express some serious concerns about this bill. I want to give you a little bit of perspective. Since the COVID pandemic struck, I meet weekly with my counterparts from all around the country. I will tell you that the issues that we faced in Georgia regarding unemployment insurance are not unique to Georgia. This was an issue, it's been an issue all over the country. I will tell you this, however, that Georgia has handled this issue from an unemployment insurance standpoint much better than nearly every other state. And I'd like you to dwell on that. This was a department, no department of labor across the country was prepared to deal with the onslaught, the tsunami of unemployment insurance claims that have been experienced. Georgia did a relatively good job, in fact, better than most states. I will tell you that also what we've learned is that a fair amount of the time of your Department of Labor employees has been devoted to sorting out fraud. And that diverts the attention from processing claims. Now, in the process, while some claims may have been delayed, these folks have saved us, taxpayers, millions and millions of dollars, and that can't go unnoticed. I will also tell you that from the standpoint of Georgia employers, there's been some innovative things done by the Department of Labor that have been copied around the country. One is the filing of partial claims, whereby an employer who is having to shut down or lay off because of COVID-19 could file claims on behalf of their workforce. That's keeping all these employees from having to go to a Department of Labor site or website to file claims. I can tell you it was a very, very efficient way to handle unemployment insurance claims. Georgia's one of the very few states that had that innovative approach to claims filing. And we shared that in these weekly calls. other states have begun to take a look at that process. The curious thing also to us, I guess, is the title Chief Labor Officer. Really what you're looking for is an ombudsman or a legislative liaison. That'd be one thing. And maybe the department would welcome that. Have somebody in place that you could bring your concerns to and could work with the department to provide the kind of information that you're seeking. But to call this person Chief Labor Officer, I think is just going to lead to havoc, confusion, and the undercutting of the current labor commissioner. And it strikes us, frankly, that with the expiration date as it is, there may be some political overtones. I mean, this person would be in the position truly to undercut a constitutional officer and his authority. If it starts at the Labor Department, where does it end? Agriculture Department? Revenue Department? EPD? How about at the General Assembly? I think this is an ill-advised precedent. I think, if you want, as the original bill suggested, a person at the Labor Department appointed by the governor, or in this case, the speaker, then you ought to draft legislation that provides for a constitutional amendment where voters can elect where we wouldn't elect a labor commissioner, but to be appointed by the governor or whoever. So again, I recognize that there's been efforts to deal with parts of this bill that folks have found unworkable, including the Georgia Association of Manufacturers. And I would hope that you would really find an alternative to this piece of legislation that would bring about the results that you're seeking to achieve. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to take this off the table.
All those in favor? Aye. All opposed? Aye. Okay. With that, I think, and I do want to say this, that Mr. comments were about the UI, and I'm thankful that, thanks to Kirby, he's been looking as well, working on this bill. We removed, when this bill started, it was UI and audits, and everything about UI has been taken off, and I'm glad to see that. So,
Mr. Chairman, we can't hear online.
I'm assuming media services heard you say that. All the mics turned up. Okay, I'm sorry. My mic was on, not on, but y'all could hear the speaker, right?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. I had my mic off. I was trying to messed up there. Okay, with that, Representative Kirby, I believe you had a motion.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I move this bill do pass, and that would be LC 364828S. Substitute to Senate Bill 156.
Is there a second? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
No.
Okay, we're going to do let's see, who's that? All right, hold on, typing it. If you're online, we're going to ask for, if you're online, please type yes or no, or aye or no, uh, in the chat box. And while you're doing that, for the room, all those in favor of the bill say aye, or raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. All those opposed, raise your hand. 3. So 4-3 in the room. All right. All right.
Mr. Chairman,
Motion passes 7-4. You're,
Mr. Chairman, I'm a no. So
okay. 7 to,
I'm a no.
okay, 7-5. Okay. Okay, 6-5, the motion carries. Senator Harbin, you're on the rules. Next on the agenda, Representative Lim. Oh, hey, thank you. I had put in your folders, I think. Do y'all have the consent form? Okay, that was one of the things that was in the very first version that wanted to put in code. And actually, the department gave us a form that already exists. So just keep this in mind. If you get calls from your constituents, you already have the ability now for them to give you access to information. So we do have a consent form, and that should help all of us. Thank you, Representative Kirby, for that. Yes, that's your copy. Is his copy of the bill in? Tell us your bill number and LC number, and let's see, it should be in
Yes.
our folders.
Yes, I'm happy to present House Bill 181, that is LC 364504.
All right, Representative Lynn, tell us.
Of course. Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, and the committee, for the opportunity for a hearing on this bill. As I was thinking through the three pieces of legislation that were being heard today or planned to be heard today, it occurred to me this is perhaps the least ambitious of the bills, but I hope still maximally efficient to achieve a certain aim. A quick summary of the bill. This bill simply would provide that employers who are already required to provide certain notices in the workplace, usually in a prominent place like the break room, give a copy of those notices to their employees. And obviously, as you can imagine, the main purpose of this is, of course, to protect the employees. And it's really attempting to respond to the behavioral reality that most people either do not go to their break rooms or do not otherwise see these notices. I was also thinking myself, as an employer of the state, I wouldn't know where this information would be posted, but perhaps that's on me. But on the other side of things, I do think it's as well to the benefit of the employers to prevent some of the problems, inefficiencies, even potential tragedies that come about because people simply do not have this kind of information. I had been told, for example, that in a previous committee hearing, there had been a debate about worker classification and to whom that burden falls. And I would imagine that on either side, that does cause a lot of inefficiencies and potentially financial problems, even litigiousness. And I would argue that the FLSA, or the Fair Labor Standards Act, is one of those notices that's required under federal law to be posted in the workplace. Why not give that to the employee themselves? And of course, particularly as an Asian American, given last week's tragedies, I do have to bring up that that is certainly a workplace safety issue. Yet another notice required to be posted in the workplace is OSHA, that is Occupational Standards and Health Administration, the OSHA Act. That information is simply to whom to report if there might be a problem in the workplace. And to me, it also does protect against litigiousness. What I would imagine under this bill that an employer would do is, I don't mandate it, but I would imagine that the best practice would be for the employer to require any employees to sign this, and then so then they couldn't argue, or to sign rather receipt of this as a standard practice already. So then many employees wouldn't be able to argue that, oh, we didn't receive this. So in my mind, that also does protect against some measure of litigiousness. And I'll close by saying, again, to me, this is trying to be maximally beneficial for minimal burden, to the extent that this is, to use an HR word, very commensurate, because you wouldn't be required as an employer to give any notices that you're not already required and do not already have a copy of. And I will also say a lot of employers are good employers. They already do most, if not all of this. This is just attempting, again, to capture perhaps a smaller portion of employers, again, both to protect the employees and the employers ultimately. And with that, I will take any questions.
Very good presentation. Representative Kirby.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I understand what you're trying to do. Now, this, of course, this won't take any of the posting requirements away. We'll still have to post everything. But when you say all notices, I mean, I've got 400 people in my facility. USERA doesn't affect very many of them. I'm just wasting time and paper making USERA copies for probably 398 people that it's not affected. You mentioned the Steiger Act or the OSH Act. One of the things in there under hearing conservation is a copy of the entire standard has to be posted. Now, when you print that out, that's about 10 pages on most standard fonts, unless you make it so little nobody can read it. You're talking about an awful lot of things. I think, and I know this is hearing only, you might look at going back and maybe listing some of them where some of these things maybe don't really need to be given to them in hand. And then the other thing, of course, we do a pretty detailed orientation, including all of our benefit programs, and they got 60 days to sign up online, and they go in effect after 90 days, kind of standard stuff. And about day 58, they're up there because they haven't read any of it. So just because I give it to them doesn't mean they're reading it. And if they, you know, how that goes. So I understand what you're trying to do, but I think this all is just getting it a little too extreme for stuff that's not going to apply to that many people.
If I could respond to that, Representative Kirby, I very much appreciate that. And I will say, in developing this legislation, I actually went to several staffing agencies to see how they do their practices. And I very much take what you're saying. In the interest of, I suppose, being parsimonious or elegant, I worded it in this way. But particularly in the future, I'd be very open to listing those acts that would be most applicable to the most number of employers. I do take that some of it probably wouldn't apply to a lot of folks, but taking the most specific ones, I very much would be open to that. And I do want to your second point, I very much agree that just because you read something does not mean that people understand it. But that's what I go back to. I think part of the benefit is that people can then say, especially if you require them to sign it, as I know that you do, Representative Kirby, then they wouldn't be able to say that we didn't get it. At the same time, they would have a copy and know at least where to locate it. So I very much take what you're saying. I think part of that is the benefit, because you were not requiring anyone to, because I've had conversations, what does this do about litigiousness? It simply informs people, and that is up to them to do with it what they will.
Representative Lim, I appreciate your answer, because I had some of the same concerns as far as the volume of stuff. And so maybe as we work, because as you know, this bill is still alive for next year, as we work with us as far as what types of notices. Personally, I'd like to see this married with the other big issue this committee has dealt with for 7-8 years, and that's employee misclassification. And would love to see employers have to give notice to employees so that they know under most circumstances, if you work 40 hours, after that, you get overtime, because I think that's one of the biggest abuses we're seeing that hurts our average laborer. So I appreciate your response. And you also have a question from Chairman Jones. No,
Sorry, that's me. Number 15.
Representative Pruitt.
Okay, thank you. Good morning. I just wanted to, I'm not even going to rehash it, but I definitely agree with Representative Kirby there on what he was saying about it, and also the application to part-time versus full-time aspect of it. And and contractors as well, it becomes a burdensome thing. But also, one thing I did not see mentioned in here I had a question about was the revisions. So let's say middle of this looks like it's just for new hire only. As things are changing and the paperwork changes, am I responsible for continuing to push that things and flow that down? So rev changes was just another question or point of.
Absolutely. That is a very good point. In my mind, and as I was drafting this, it was intended to be at the time of hiring, and that is clear. Again, part of that was because I do understand that notices changes, but I am very cognizant of the fact that I do not want to burden employers too much. So I think that's a simpler answer to that question. But to the point of combining two of the points, I would be very interested in focusing on specific aspects because you mentioned part-time, full-time workers. They might not need all of the notifications for sure, but I think they would need that FLSA or the employer misclassification. So I'm very open to making this even narrower to get the most important pieces of information to those whom it would apply.
Check and see. I don't think you've got any questions. I don't see anybody online. Now we do. If you wait long enough, you'll always get another one. Representative Kirby.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be quick. You mentioned you talked to several staffing agencies. I'm going to volunteer him. We got a guy sitting right over here that deals with manufacturing plants all over the state of Georgia and knows this stuff. Staffing agencies got some, like hearing conservation doesn't apply to them because in their office, it's not noisy. I'd suggest get with Mr. Bowen and talk to him about maybe some of the businesses or larger and smaller ones that he could probably share some light on other than just staffing agencies as you move forward with this.
Absolutely. I tried to work very closely with the Georgia Association of Manufacturers because along with Representative Marin, we are the third largest hub in Norcross of manufacturing and logistics. So I will take that very seriously. Thank you, Representative Kirby.
Okay, and I'm sorry, I did miss them online. Okay, Representative Park online.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Lim, thank you so much for your bill. Is it not true that under your bill, notifications could simply be sent via email rather than paper copies, which would be really less burdensome than employers? And is it further not true that by ensuring employees receive notices that employers could potentially be protected by ensuring that any legal notices that they're required to send have been sent?
Representative Park, yes and yes. I worded this broadly because, again, I wanted to give as much room to employers to implement this as they will. But because of that wording, certainly this would, and again, in my mind, I would imagine that most employers would avail themselves of simply sending these notices electronically. And then to your second point, yes, again, this bill is intended, in my mind, primarily, of course, for the employee, but a part and parcel of that is to avoid, again, the inefficiencies and problems created on both ends, employer and employee, by simply, lack of information. So yes, to that point as well. Thank you for those questions.
Representative McLean.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And he's probably answered almost all the questions because we do have very intelligent people on the committee. I guess my only concern is I know that Representative Kirby talked about a cost factor and then some extra work. And it's all know that I'm more of an employee person than I am an employer person. My concern is I do like that he's doing it for new hires only. And I do appreciate the question of Representative Parks about online and being. So I'm just trying to figure out is my question to you is Representative Lim is do you see this being for all employers or just the ones that have a certain number of employees?
Right. Technically, it is for all employers, but again, I drafted the bill in a way that it was commensurate, using that word again, with what they're already required to have. So if they're not required to post a certain notice because there are fewer than 10 employees, then they wouldn't be required, of course, to provide those notices to their employees. So I'm very open to wording it, but I would like to keep it so that the smaller employees don't necessarily have any more, employers, don't necessarily have any more burden that they have. But to a simpler answer is it would apply technically to all employers.
Thank you.
Representative Holly?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Representative Lim, for bringing us just as a way to at least ensure that all parties in the workplace are just aware. I wanted to know as to what was the feedback that you received from those other agencies when you mentioned it to them that that the copy of the FLSA and these standards could be made available via email. Did they respond that it was going to be a costly matter for them to distribute this electronically?
To that question, all of the ones that I spoke to already provide the HR paperwork essentially via email. So because they were approaching it from their perspectives, they did not see it as costly. Of course, when I was talking to them, I took a tour of what was posted in their break rooms, et cetera, and what was posted in their HR handbooks. And you can imagine, especially most employer handbooks are very large these days. So I would like to sort of keep that perspective in mind that, again, a lot of this information is already being provided, and we certainly open again to working it so that we're not adding too much. But I do want to emphasize that the most important pieces of information should be included, and particularly if employers avail themselves of the email method, as the three staffing agencies I spoke to did, then it would certainly lessen that burden, while also making it easier, of course, for employees to check a box saying that they got them.
Thank you. That makes sense, especially as we're transitioning out of a pandemic. It just looks like this is something that could be fairly done rather adequately to make sure that everybody has it, and without having to buy a ream of paper, maybe. Thank you.
Absolutely.
All right, Representative Lim, I appreciate that. And just as a suggestion, a couple of key folks, just because they represent the spectrum, would be Representative Kirby and Representative Carpenter. Since that's a large outfit versus smaller, but appreciate the time and your patience in this committee, because I know we've been dragging you along for some time, but trying to get some of these other issues out. So I appreciate it.
Third time's the charm. Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman and the committee, for having me, and I will work with both Representative Kirby and Representative Carpenter, who I have spoken to about this. Thank you.
Thank you. And anybody else that wants to make contact with Representative Lim, please do so. Okay, Representative Schofield, tell us about House Bill 356.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. You said third time's the charm.
Yeah.
What about fifth?
Yeah.
Well, thank you, and members of the committee. This is a really simple bill. The LC number is 364585. And basically, I want to first thank Mr. Vice Chair Kirby for all your help and guidance in this bill. Really, this bill, all it does is it mirrors the language in the age discrimination in employment on the federal law, which we have they don't have a cap. Line 12 really does not have a cap on there for age discrimination, whereas Georgia does have a 40 to 70 age limits on age discrimination. And so all I'm doing is removing any barriers and taking out the 40 and just not, it's 40 years and above. That's simple changes because we know people are working longer, and age discrimination is real. This bill is supported by AARP, and thank you for hearing my bill.
I was just about to ask you, I hear you've got some good support, and yep, they've come to see me about this. Does anybody else have any questions here or in line? Is there anybody out there that wants to speak to the bill? You don't have any questions. Like I said, it's pretty simple. So we will keep the process moving along. With that, being no other business, we are adjourned.